Good evening, everybody. My name's Kate Genovese. This is the Table Talk Show, and tonight we have a very special guest, Todd Civin. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming all the way from Spencer, Massachusetts.
Yeah, Spencer with a little detour in Winchendon, I guess.
Oh yeah, Winchendon,
Yeah.
Yep. So Todd's here tonight. He's going to tell us a little bit about himself, but he co-authored 2 books here, One Letter at a Time. It's a story of Dick and Rick Hoyt. They're the father and son who run in the marathon and have been doing it for many, many years. And then the other book you co-wrote, although you are not owning up to totally co-writing it, Destined to Run by Wes Harding. So I am amazed that you could co-write these books. I'm a writer, as you know, and I tried to write a book with my son, and we almost killed each other because we had such different ideas, so it was kind of hard. How did you?
Maybe the fact that Rick's nonverbal might have made it easier. There wasn't a lot of arguing. The book with Rick, it was an idea we had together about 3 years ago, and because Rick's nonverbal.
Does he have cerebral palsy?
He has cerebral palsy. Who was born with his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck.
Oh, okay.
So Rick does not speak, though he communicates. He's of normal or above average intelligence. He was a graduate from Boston University with his degree in special education. So a lot of people look at him or any disabled person and they might assume that there's not the mental capacity.
Yeah.
But Rick's a sharp guy. And so
How old is he now?
he's now 51.
Wow.
We all think of him as little Ricky Hoyt running with his dad at age 12, 13, 14, but Rick's 51 and Dick is 73.
And are they going to run in the marathon next week?
They are. Their 31st Boston Marathon.
That's amazing.
It's incredible. I get winded running up the street, and yet they still do 26.2 miles. I spoke to Dick this week, and I said to him, is this it? And he didn't say it wasn't, but he didn't say it was. So we'll see how many more. He's 72, and they don't run for the same speed as they used to, obviously. Right. Their personal record is 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is incredible for any marathoner.
That is absolutely incredible.
He's pushing 160 pounds when he pushes Rick in the wheelchair together. So the fact that he's slowing down at age 73 is no surprise. But they're very prideful people, and I think it hurts Dick a little bit to know that he is now running a 6 and a 7 hour marathon when he used to do it in 2.5 hours. Last year was 90 degrees. People were dropping like flies.
Oh, yeah.
And Dick and Rick finished in 6 or 6.5 hours, and he was relatively disappointed because it took him so long. But you and I might have we would have a difficult time doing it at our age, let alone at 73 and pushing somebody. But to me, they're more than a finishing time. They're as much a part of the Boston Marathon as Hopkinton is. When you think of the Boston Marathon, people who are fans of it, you think of the Kenyan runners, and you think of maybe Johnny Kelly, who ran it for a number of years, and our local Bill Rogers and Uda Pippik and the Hoyts, and so. I think even if they chose not to run the full marathon, I would hope that they still run partial marathons so that people who are fans can still see them and cheer them on.
Now, I wonder if the dad practices on his own. He must.
He does, and he's done this. Rick gets sore, so Rick doesn't always practice with him, but Dick runs with a bag of cement in the wheelchair, 100-pound bag of cement, and he says that people in the neighborhood think he's crazy. Who's the crazy guy running up and down the street with a bag of cement in his chair? But that's how he has to practice, and I know that his schedule is full. He either runs every day or goes to the gym every day.
Is he retired?
He's a retired lieutenant colonel, I believe, from the Air National Guard. And so what he does now is he runs, and he also does public speaking, spreading their message, which is, yes, you can.
I love that. Yes, you can.
That's, people who don't know the story as runners. It's a lesson that all of us can learn, because what I said in the book is, how can we complain about the itty bitty pebble in our shoe when other people look at everything and say, not no I can't, but yes I can. They don't say no to anything. The only thing they really said no to is doctors told them to put Rick in an institution because he'd be nothing more than a vegetable.
I read that in the beginning
And
of
he
the
says,
book.
no,
His
we
parents-
can't do that.
His parents were amazing.
Yeah.
And his mother, Judy, sounds absolutely
Yeah,
amazing.
she's passed away since, but
Yeah.
the story that I love is, again, more than just a running story. There's a Massachusetts state statute, chapter 766, that makes it mandatory that disabled people are allowed in our public schools. And that's been the way since, I believe, the early 1970s. It's Dick and Rick and Judy Hoyt that made that passage, made it happen.
Wow.
And if we think about our schools today and mainstreaming, think how many disabled children walk the halls of our schools today, or ride the halls of our schools today. And it's important to us as a society, and it's because of what Dick and Rick and Judy Hoyt did. That to me is a bigger story than running a marathon or doing a triathlon. It's how we treat each other as human beings.
Right,
So
right.
it's amazing.
And he is so with it cerebrally, you know, that he could take the challenge of public school.
Yeah, what he, you know, in the early years, before he got his speaking apparatus, he speaks not only verbally, which we can explain that, but he uses a computer. It was developed by Tufts University, and it was in the early 70s, and the family raised $5,000 to create the Tufts Interactive Communicator, which is they call TIC. They also called it the Hope Machine because they hoped that Rick would be able to use it so that he could communicate. Before he had that, the schools were justified in saying, you know, he can't communicate to us, so number one, we wouldn't be able to communicate back to him, but we don't even know if he's of intelligence. So once they were able to create the computer and he could communicate with the family and then ultimately in the classroom, the schools felt that they had to allow him in. And Rick, you know, I think he says he was a B student, but he also says it took him 7 years to get through college because, quote, he was a bit of a party animal. But in reality, he'd take a few classes a semester. He's the first nonverbal graduate of Boston University.
That's just amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
It is.
You
And
know,
does he work?
Rick does some speaking. He really, his work is spreading his message. So he, you know, I encourage Rick to do more than he does. You know, I'm now not his co-author, but I'm his friend. And so, you know, we push each other, I think. I would like to see Rick do a lot more things in the classroom. When I'm together with Rick, I think it's really important. A child walks up to Rick and you can see the look on their face is, I don't know what to do with him. I don't want to break him. I don't want to touch him. I don't want to talk to him. I encourage the kids to hold his hand and to say, you know what, to touch him. They had an event yesterday, a statue unveiling, and a little boy, a little boy walked up to him, and I just saw that look in his eyes. He didn't know, he didn't know how to approach the monster. So I just put my hand on his hand and Rick's, and I said, touch his hands. I said, he has very soft, girly hands because he doesn't work that hard. And Rick laughs because he has a great sense of humor, and that's really how Rick connects with people, is through his humor. So we tease each other, and you could see the boy's guard come down. You know, he could now.
Relax.
Yeah. And it's intimidating. You walk up to somebody, and they can't speak. Do you talk to them? Do you know, I find myself, I talk to Rick, and then I stand there saying, okay, I'm not really going to get an answer unless we do, he calls it, unless we speak with each other, which is through alphabet and through nods of the head. But the average person who walks up to him and doesn't know how to speak to him, you say, hey Rick, how you doing? And then you wait for him to respond, and he might give you a head nod, but it's kind of an awkward conversation. So I understand why people don't walk up to him, but we encourage them because, you know, the message Rick wanted to get out in his book is, I'm just like you are, so treat me like you would treat other people.
Right, right. Now, how did you meet them?
By accident again. I went to college for journalism, but I spent the next 25 years doing other things. I managed a jewelry company for a number of years, and
You went to Syracuse.
I went to Syracuse for communications, but then I didn't go into it. So my previous job before meeting the Hoyts was I was in the distribution field in a book publishing company.
Oh.
And I got laid off after about 7 years. I was down in the dumps. It was during the recent recession, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I started to write sports. I'd blog sports on the Bleacher Report just to keep myself from going crazy. And I developed a little bit of a following. A friend of mine said, Todd, you're too good to write about steroids and escalating baseball salaries. You need to write something that's more from the heart.
Meaningful.
So I started to write sports from the heart. I wrote about a disabled athlete named Roger Crawford, who's a tennis player, collegiate tennis player. I read about him in Chicken Soup for the Soul years ago. And I called him up and I said, Roger, I read about you years ago. I'd like to do a story about you. So we did an interview and a story. And I did a story about a guy named John Young, who's a little person, and he's a marathoner, and some of the challenges that he has running at 4 feet tall. And then I knew the Hoyt story. So I emailed them and I said, you know, I'm a blogger. I'd like to do your story. I'd like to do an interview. And the email came back from Kathy, who's their office manager, who said, Dear Todd, we only do 2 or 3 face-to-face interviews a year. So I assumed it was going to say, so thank you anyhow. But they said, so we'd like you to meet us this Saturday at the house. We can give you 2 hours. I was like beside myself.
Yeah.
I went to the house. I did an interview, and I was, you know, I felt like I was in the presence of God, maybe a step under God, the Pope or something. And I did the interview with Dick. 2 hours they granted me. Rick wasn't there. He was at his own home. He lives by himself. As I was leaving, I thanked them for the interview, and I said, you know, I'm unemployed right now, and there's this new thing called Facebook. And I think that you would benefit by having Facebook. Would you let me do a page for you? So they let me do a page, and then about a week later, they called me up and they said, you know, we're embarrassed to ask you this, but we're going to a Legends Ball in Foxborough for the Hockomock YMCA. And there's going to be a sports legend at every table. We have 2 extra seats. Would you like to go? I was like, again, me? You kidding? And I say that I felt like I opened my baseball card collection, and there was all the people in my baseball card collection were at these tables. So that night, I met Rick, and I think I said to him the same thing I said earlier. Oh, you have hands like a girl, soft hands like you've never done a day's work. And he laughed, and we chatted with each other, and through Rick's ability to speak, which is 1 letter at a time, hence the name of the book, he spelled out to his dad, can you thank Todd and Katie, my wife's name, Katie, for coming here? I was like, wow, you know, beside myself.
Yeah.
And a sentence like that takes Rick 5 or 6 minutes to say. So he and I became friends that night, and through our conversation that night, we talked about doing a book. But, you know, at that point, I had never done one, and I hoped to have been employed at some point. And luckily, I was unemployed for a while, and we got to start it, and we stopped a few times because I started to work. But I knew, even though I told Rick several times, you know what, Rick, I just don't have time to continue this. How can I be in the presence of somebody whose motto is, yes, you can, and I'm saying, no, I can't.
Yeah.
So we continued, and we got serious about it, and it came out August of last year. And I couldn't be, you know, it fulfilled something inside me, too. I would have gone my whole life saying, you know what, I wonder if I could have been successful at this.
Yeah.
And now I don't know how success is defined, it's not, for me, it's not monetary. For me, it's, I have my name on the front of a book.
It's like giving birth.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess
That's
so.
how I felt when
Yeah.
my first book came out. I said, "Oh my God, my name was on." I said,
Yeah.
"I feel like I had another child."
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was a wonderful
Yeah.
feeling. I mean, it's such an accomplishment, and you help other people. I mean, I haven't completely read the book, and I'm dying to, but it's so inspirational reading it, and tell the audience about the story of his first words.
Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, I love that story.
I told a little bit of it. Rick is nonverbal. They took home the tick, the Hope machine in 1972. Now, Rick's a big hockey fan. If you see any videos of Rick on YouTube,
So how old would he have been then?
he'd have been about 11.
Oh, okay.
As little boys, we had a tabletop, little boys and girls, we had a tabletop hockey
Yeah.
set. And you'd have the guys
Yeah,
that,
I know those, yeah.
the goalie, you'd move back and forth with the sliding thing. And that's what I think of when I see Rick and his brothers playing hockey. He was in his wheelchair, he had pillows tied to him, and the brothers would move him back and forth to play goalie.
I
And
love
but Rick says if he wasn't born disabled, he would have been a hockey player, and who are we to argue? And he loves Bobby Orr, and he's just a big hockey fan. So anyhow, they took the TIC computer home, and what he would do is, the way it works is letters go by on the screen. When he gets to the correct letter, he taps his head, which is really the only part of his body he can control. So he taps his head and he selects that letter. Well, Dick thought his first words would be "Hi, Dad," and Judy, his mom, said, "Hi, Mom." Well, Rick starts to spell out G-O-B, Gob, G-O-B-R, and they're saying, "Oh, he's just spelling gibberish. He can't do this." And he continued, G-O-B-R-U-I-N-S, go Bruins. And everybody laughed, and Rick laughs. And so that's the start of the story. Well, the story continues 39 years later. The Bruins are in the Stanley Cup again in 2011 against Vancouver, and they win. And I say we only because Dick and Kathy forwarded it to me. We got an email that said, it was from Andrew Ferentz, who's a defenseman for the Bruins. And it said, "Dear Dick and Rick, I got your email address from Zdeno Chara, who was the captain of the Bruins." And that by itself, I get the baseball card collection feeling. And we want to let you know that before Game 7 of the World Series, we saw your video in the locker room just as we were ready to hit the ice. And we were so inspired, we went out and we won Game 7.
Awesome.
And I call it just perfect symmetry. And the email continues, so we would like you to spend the day with us in the Stanley Cup at Spaulding Hospital in Boston, where we'll go around and we'll show all the kids in the hospital the Stanley Cup, and you can meet them. And a gentleman named Matt Brown was there, who I think is from Woburn. He was a hockey player, injured, paralyzed. I hope he's from Woburn. Forgive me if he's not.
I don't think so.
Okay. Anyhow, Matt Brown is a Massachusetts folk hero now because of his recovery, so he was there with us. And we went to Spaulding, and then we had dinner in the North End with the Stanley Cup in a nice Italian restaurant with Andrew Ferentz and the Cup and Matt Brown, and it was a great day. And to me, it completes the circle that the Hoyts were again responsible for bringing the Stanley Cup to Boston.
Yeah.
So, great
And
story.
how is this book doing?
It's doing well.
How can people get it?
Okay, they can get it from my website. Do I say
Tell
my
us, yeah,
website?
sure.
Okay.
We're going to put it up on the
Okay,
screen as well.
civinmediarelations.com. Civin is spelled C-I-V-I-N. Also, any of the Hoyt races, they bring the book there. It will be at the Expo this Saturday at the Marathon. Also available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. This week we put it in Wellesley Books. Any independent book
books.
dealer who asks us for the book, we'll put it there and sell it.
Yeah.
And is it doing well? I have a lot of them still in my garage, but it's
So
doing.
you're self-published.
We're self-published, but it's through Mascot Books, so we have they get it into a lot of distributors. But it's a bigger challenge than I thought it would be. I thought the name Hoyt would just you know, people would be knocking at the door. Hoyt's a big name worldwide, but whatever. It's to me, it's not the number of sales, but it's the kind of sales. I got to tell one story because this warms me up all over. One of our early sales was a couple from the Netherlands.
Oh, okay.
And just to me, again, social media, the beauty of social media, somebody from the Netherlands can hear about the book. It was a guy named Robert Brethauer, and he has a disabled son named Noah. Noah is blind and deaf and in a wheelchair. So they ordered one letter at a time, and when it came, we have a Facebook wall of fame. So people will send their picture with the book. We put it on the Facebook wall of fame. And to me, it's like Flat Stanley, that book that kids bring the little Flat Stanley around the globe, and you have a picture of Flat Stanley in front of the Eiffel Tower. So Robert got the book and he sent it to us from the Netherlands in a pair of wooden shoes, which of course, if it's in the Netherlands, it has to be wooden shoes and windmills.
Absolutely.
Then he sent us an email a couple weeks later in his relatively broken English, and it said, Todd, I hope I'm okay to ask you this question. We would like to start a similar running group to the Hoyts in the Netherlands. I'm going to lose my accent because I don't do it that well. So could you help us? So there's a group around the country called My Team Triumph. My Team Triumph are people like the Hoyts. There's an able-bodied runner pushing disabled runners. The able-bodied runners are called angels, and the disabled are called captains. And there's about 15 or so groups around the country. I've become associated with their CEO, and they do the same thing. They give legs to disabled people, athletes or soldiers coming back from the war, or people born with CP, etc. So anyhow, long story short, we opened the first chapter of My Team Triumph in the Netherlands from the book. Wow. This May, the Hoyts are having a road race in Holland, Mass, which is where they live. And Robert and his family are coming over to run with the Hoyts.
Oh,
There's
amazing.
also about 60 runners coming up from Team Hoyt Virginia Beach, and runners from My Team Triumph around the country to run with the Hoyts and barbecue with the Hoyts. Robert and his family and I are going to a Pawtucket Red Sox game the Monday after the race. And to me, from the book comes, think what this is doing. It's opening doors for people. It's bringing people from other parts of the world together in a common cause. Yes. I mean, it feels just, you and I were talking earlier about, you know, what it feels like to be an author, what it feels like. This fulfills me emotionally. You know, my other job is I work for a generator company. I like what I do, but I go home every day feeling like I'm not doing anything to better the world.
Yeah,
this is my way. This is my passion. This gets me excited, warm inside. And you know, I was a jewelry salesman. How excited can you get selling overpriced jewelry to somebody who can't afford it? And I'd go home every day and I'd say, yeah, I'm really good at this, but what's it all mean? Now I go home and I say, yeah, I think I'm okay at this, but this is what it means. I'm changing the world and, you know, my little piece of the world, and that feels good.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's like paying it forward for all the good things that you
Absolutely.
have in your life. I read the forward in the book and how much you love your family and your dedication. You four or five kids? 4?
I have, I'll call them 5. I have 3 from my first marriage, and my wife has 2 children that I'll call my children. We don't use the word stepchildren. We call them escalator parents and escalator children, because an escalator sounds so much better than steps. It's going up.
Oh, okay.
So we call, the kids call me their escalator dad. So yeah, I have 5 children. I now have 2 grandchildren.
Nice.
I have 2 living parents who I'm blessed to have, and a brother and a sister. And yeah, and family is really important. So yeah, this is my world is where it's supposed to be finally.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everybody watches the marathon and the Hoyts. But just tell me about this book now.
Okay.
This is interesting as well.
This is Destined to Run.
Yeah, by Wes Harding. And on his arm, he has tattooed in, yes, I can?
Yes, I can, yes.
Yeah. Is that a real tattoo? Or
No, but I won't show it because I have a hairy back. But I have a Team Hoyt tattoo on my back that says, yes, you can, a real tattoo. And I got that before last year's marathon. I'm a little bit of a extrovert. So last year we had all our Team Hoyt runners. We have a Team Hoyt marathon team. So I naturally took my shirt off to show my tattoo.
So how many people actually
Okay.
run with them, and does he?
Wes does, yes. The Hoyts have a foundation in which they raise money and awareness for disabled people, and then through their foundation they make some great donations to Easter Seals, or I know that they provide support to an equestrian camp for disabled people. So the money they raise, they pay forward as well to disabled people. So each year they have a marathon team. Last year there were 30 runners because it was their 30th marathon. So we got some extra bibs.
Yep.
And so they're runners from around the country who become part of the team. They have to raise $5,000 each. And in order to become a member of the team, they have to send an essay to Kathy and Dick Hoyt and Rick to tell why they want to be a member of the team.
Oh.
So there's some awesome stories. One of the team members is from Saskatchewan, and his story is he was in a car accident maybe about 8 years ago. He hit a moose head on. He was left paralyzed. Doctor said, "You will never walk again." Well, last year he ran the Boston Marathon. He's also an Ironman, which means he's done some races that are 2-mile swims,
Right. Oh, yeah.
110-mile bikes, and 26-mile marathon. Wes's story. Wes was an overweight couch potato. He weighed about 225 pounds with, he says, gusts up to 240. And at 40 years old, he didn't like the way he looked or felt or behaved. One of the first chapters in the book tells about the eating binges that he would go on. And they're beyond description. He once had a contest with his brother-in-law in which at Thanksgiving dinner he gained 6 pounds because they just ate and ate and ate as a contest. And it's almost vulgar. He would sit at home at night. He wouldn't eat during the day. And then he'd come home at night and he'd have a big meal, and his wife would bake him a pie. Not a piece of pie, but a pie. And if his kids wanted a piece of pie, he would say, "No, you go get your own pie. This is my pie." One day, about New Year's Eve, where we all resolved to make ourselves better, Wes said, "You know what? Enough is enough. I'm not going to do this anymore." And you or I might say, "Okay, we're going to go out and run." Wes said, "I'm going to run a marathon." And again, psychologically, I think the person who becomes addicted to food may be the same person who becomes addicted to marathon running. He got off the couch. He used to run at night because he was so embarrassed to run by daylight. But he got up off the couch and he started to run. The first night he ran a 5K or 3 miles, which is admirable. You know, if I go out, when I ran several years ago, I've actually run a marathon, Boston, and the first time I went out, I ran 1 telephone pole.
Yeah.
And patted myself on the back and said, "Good boy," and went home and said I'd do it again tomorrow. He went out and he ran 5K, and he tells the story of his transgression from 240-pound couch potato to a 145-pound, very gifted and competitive marathon runner.
Is he running in Boston?
He's running
as
in
well?
Boston again, but if you look at the picture in his book, he went from looking like me to looking like, oh my God, he's ripped.
And how old is he?
He's 44 now, so he's done all this in 4 years.
Wow.
He
looks so happy.
He's so happy. He's a different person.
Yeah.
And the book is more than that. And
it's a spiritual journey.
it is. When I went up to see Wes, I met him last year in April at the marathon. And then I went up to see him in October of this year he did a book tour for me for One Letter at a Time. So we went to a group at his church called Run for God. And then the next day he had us at a mall where we sold some books. Then at his church the next day. And for the 4 days, we sat around and we talked about him. And I don't know if you're a Seinfeld fan. Are you? No? Okay. There's a chapter in Seinfeld where Kramer takes you on what's called the Peterman reality tour. And he puts you on a bus and you go around town and he tells you about all the different things that happen in town. Well, Wes kind of did the same thing for me, but I didn't realize that he was telling me about his book. So he took me to the place where he lived when he met his wife, and he took me to an area of Sarnia, Ontario called Chemical City, where all the chemical plants were and whatever. I didn't know he was telling me his story. At the end of 4 days, I said, Wes, you know, what you've done, you have a book here. There's so much that happened in this man's life. He lost a child at an early age. His parents had a business, a big cleaning business, that they had no insurance, and it burned to the ground, and they made the decision to rebuild it. One of his daughters was born with the tendons in her legs backwards, so her legs actually faced backwards, and they called in surgeons to correct it. And Wes, again, he's a very spiritual man. His wife is very spiritual. They prayed, and within days, when the doctor came from out of town, the daughter's legs were no longer backwards. Believe what you want. It's a miracle. Some people say, okay, whatever. Some people don't. I say when I helped Wes write this, the number of things that have happened in his life that most people would trip up and fall down, and he, through his faith in God, has gotten up and overcome beyond belief. I keep on trying to convey to people, you know what? If you don't run or you don't need to lose weight, it doesn't matter. This book is way more than that.
Yeah.
It's about just,
It's
about believing. It's about yes, you can. That's what it's about. It's about never saying no because you don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. So Wes is able to quote scripture that I think I know the Adam and Eve story, and that's pretty much it. But, you know, through his use of what he knows and is able to speak, the book just, it came out far better than I ever believed it could have, because he has a gifted way of telling his story. And I said to you, I don't take credit for this book. Rick and I, we wrote that book together because Rick would share his ideas with me, and I'd have to take his ideas and put them onto paper to convey to an audience. So Rick and I say in the book, the words you read are Rick's thoughts and my way of presenting those thoughts. If, you know, I'm going to sound egotistical. If Rick could write as well as that book came out, he'd be not only a gifted athlete, but a gifted writer too. Wes, all I would do is I'd take what he wrote and I'd fluff it up a little. He calls it todding it up. You know what it is. It's a person who maybe doesn't have the ability to polish it. So that's what I did for Wes, and he was gracious enough to put my name on the cover and give me half of proceeds, which is cool too.
That's cool.
But it's, you know, I feel Wes is the author of that book, and I'm the polisher of that book. It really, the stories in it are amazing.
And once again, they can obtain that book through your website, which, why don't you say it again?
Civin Media Relations, all one word, no capitals, .com. And then Wes is also destinedtorun.net. And then all the other places too. And Wes is really, he's from Canada, so he's really gotten a great following in the Canadian market. Yeah, and he's, the city of Sarnia is about 100,000 people. It's a pretty little city. I went there in October, and he's become sort of a legend in the town. He was this year, or in the city, this year he was voted one of Sarnia's 10 most influential people. They can't keep the book in the bookstores in Sarnia. Sunday night he met and he spoke to a church group, and they said after the speaking engagement, we're not comfortable selling the book here, but you can get it at Cole's bookstore or at the gym where Wes works out. And the next day, both venues called Wes up and said, dude, you got to bring us more books. We can't keep them in here. Wow. So they really, they're flocking to Sarnia. We have a friend that we met through One Letter at a Time who lives in northern Michigan, who's having Wes out in May to run a marathon and do a book signing there. Oh, and we have a book signing Saturday morning of the marathon at the Prudential Center at Barnes & Noble.
Oh,
So
good,
he's,
that's
yeah,
good for people to know.
yeah, and that's,
Very
we
good.
call that the only appearance of Todd, Civin, and Wes Harding together on U.S. soil. Because, whatever, who knows when we'll get a
Yeah.
chance to do this
Yeah.
again.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We need to wrap this up, but
Got it.
once again, the marathon's this Monday. They
Monday,
can get the books
go ahead.
just about anywhere on your website, and also, if they went into a bookstore, they could order it.
Or ask for it,
Or ask
you know.
for it. They might have it in there.
Yeah, the way it happens now is they ask for it, and those people are able to get it from our distributor.
Yeah,
So,
you have a
so get it
distributor.
in there, and
Nice.
we'll be thrilled.
Nice. Well, I wish you so much luck.
Thank you. Awesome. Nice to meet you. Thanks for
Yes,
having me.
and thank you for coming to Table Talk. Good night.